Good morning, and I am Amber Miller, the Associate State Director of Community Outreach for AARP Wisconsin. And thank you so much for joining us for Thursdays with AARP Wisconsin. If you're looking for some of our upcoming events, as you might know, all in-person events and workshops have been canceled until the end of the year, but you definitely can find all of our virtual offerings at the website below, which is our state office website. It has all the content and information for the Thursdays with AARP Wisconsin, trivia, and also some upcoming voter education. So you can go below and register online. Also, I wanted to mention our program called Community Connections. This is a program that offers you volunteer opportunities to help within your neighborhood, but also a program called AARP Friendly Voice. And this right here is exactly what it sounds like. You just need a friendly voice to get you through the day. And this is free. And you can actually sign up a family member for it, or you could sign up for it yourself. You do not need to be an AARP member to take advantage of this initiative, and it's free. So make sure you check below at aarpcommunityconnections.org. And lastly, before we get to our guest today, the Small Dollar Big Impact Grant, Cycle 3, is due July 20th. So this is an application that you could submit to us for any fun, creative ideas that you can do for up to $1,000 that impacts your neighborhood. The website below is where you can find information and the application link, and also including past winners. So definitely check that out. And this is a statewide grant. So if you know of any organizations that are looking for just a little grant to make big impact, please have them visit below. So next, which I'm super excited about, I would love to get to our guest speaker today, which is my fabulous coworker, Courtney Anclam, who is our senior program specialist. And she is going to be talking all things fraud and scams, which is really important, but especially since COVID. So welcome, Courtney.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you have been at AARP 2 years, and I definitely want to mention that. And she has done such amazing things, bringing attention to fraud and scams to the aging population, so 50 and older, and also to our partners. A lot of folks we have to keep in mind are in isolation right now. So they're receiving text messages and phone calls and maybe mail stating these wonderful, great offers, whether it's, send us $100, you can get $1 million, to antibody testing, you name it, they have it out there. We have seen every scam, and that's why we're really excited to have Courtney here today to talk about that. If you would like to post a question or a comment during this time, you could just put it in the box below on Facebook. And then if you're joining us on YouTube, please do the same. So Courtney, when you think about fraud and identity theft, how big of a problem is it? If you could talk a little bit about what you have been seeing.
Yeah, so this is a pretty big problem. When we look at the statistics across the nation, there's over 1 million reports already in 2020, and those fraud reports have totaled a loss in over $900 million, and that's across the country. Just in Wisconsin, we've had over 18,000 reports so far in 2020, which has cost consumers over $9 million, and that data is all coming from the Federal Trade Commission. So we can kind of put numbers on like the reports and the amount of money lost, but I think it's important also that we talk about this aspect of fraud that is hard to put a number on, which is the emotional toll that happens. So a lot of scammers will use fear and intimidation to get people to send money or give up personally identifying information. And like I said, that's something we can't really put a number on, but is a really big problem. So,
and also the slide that you just showed, those are just the folks who have reported it. So if you can imagine
right.
all the folks who have not reported it because of fear or shame, I can imagine that number might even be double.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And a lot of people, because they don't send money or they don't give up information, they say, I don't have to report it. But the Federal Trade Commission and local agencies like knowing all of that information. So you're right. The numbers are probably way higher. And That was data from 2019 or 2020, sorry. And when we compare that to 2019, we're kind of like outpacing 2019 already. So it continues to be a big problem year after year.
And it's a concern too, I think, for all, and especially, the 50 and older population who might be living alone and don't have maybe regular contact with friends and family. And when they pick up the phone and they hear somebody, either pretending to be a family member needing money, they get excited because somebody's calling them and somebody needs them, and ultimately, it's a scam. So who's at risk for getting scammed at this
Yeah.
time?
So scammers are pretty indiscriminate, and they'll target just about anyone with their cons. They will target older populations a little bit more because they have more money, generally speaking. And like you said, they're most likely dealing with stuff like social isolation, especially during this pandemic. So they are more likely to give up that money or information. And when we look at the statistics, again, from the Federal Trade Commission, if you look at the age bracket of 20 to 29, you can see that they actually report way more instances of fraud versus 80 and over. That last bar is way smaller. But when older populations report that they lost money, they lose more money, if that makes sense. So younger populations are reporting more fraud, but older populations are losing more money when they do report it. So this is a good illustration that anyone can be impacted by fraud. So it's really important, if you're younger, to share this information with your older friends and family, check in with them. But also, if you're older, you need to check in with your young family members and friends and make sure that they're not making mistakes as well. And fraud just affects every generation differently. So when we look at this data here, this is the type of scams that people have reported. And we can see that online shopping and imposter scams, which is where a scammer will pretend to be someone you trust, like a government agency or business, those are all popular kind of across the board, but we see differences in the fourth and fifth categories there, where younger populations are reporting more counterfeit check scams, business opportunities, versus tech support scams and romance scams being more popular, not popular, being more targeted towards older populations. So fraud definitely affects generations differently. So it's not a matter of like, I'm young, so I can't fall for anything. It's more like they're going to try to get me in a different way.
And I actually was listening to one of the AARP fraud podcast, and they were talking about the tech support scams and also the romance scams. But the tech one I thought was interesting, because what'll happen is you get like a message that pops up and it'll say like, click here, you think it's an email, and then all of a sudden they're like holding your information like ransom, and you get a phone call. And once again, if you don't have that support from your friends and family, if you're not reaching out to somebody saying, ooh, this seems kind of off, I can see how getting scammed is pretty easy, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, so it is important, like you mentioned, to keep those networks up and just check in with people. And one other thing that I wanted to mention is the differences between the ages is the way people are contacted and the way that they pay are different. So older people, like you mentioned with the tech support scam, they'll get contacted by phone most likely, and they'll say, we noticed you have a virus, send us a gift card and we'll take care of it. And that's a really common way that people get scammed, is they get asked to send a gift card, versus younger populations are contacted more online and they use a wire transfer more often. So yeah, it's just, like I said, important to keep up with people that are important to you and make sure they're staying safe.
Absolutely. So today I am chatting with Courtney Anclam, who works with the AARP Wisconsin office, and she's talking all about frauds and scams. So if you have a question for Courtney, or if you have a comment, you could please post them below and we will get to them very shortly. When you think about, so what kind of things should people be looking out for that would be like a red flag of like, oh my God, I think I'm getting scammed, or I see some fraud going on? What should people look out for?
Yeah, so right now, scammers are kind of following the headlines, and they're taking advantage of this confusion around the pandemic. And so So one of the scams that we're seeing right now is around the contact tracing. So contact tracers are going to contact you. They might ask how you're feeling, where you've been, your occupation or work status, but they're not going to ask for money or personal information like a social security number. So anytime that you get asked to send money or you get asked to provide information like a Medicare number, social security number, bank account number, those are usually red flags, especially if you haven't initiated the contact. So those are things to be wary of in general. And the Attorney General just recently put out a press release about these contact tracing scams and what to be on the lookout for. So that's something with the pandemic that's happening specifically. Also with the pandemic, we're seeing scammers that are calling and texting and emailing consumers, and they're saying, oh, I have like a free testing kit. You just have to send me your social security number or Medicare number. And those are a scam. The testing kits, the cures and treatments, those things aren't available right now. So what's really important is to keep up with trusted sources of information like the CDC, local government agencies, to stay up to date about the coronavirus treatment. And just know if you get a message and they're saying, I have a cure, that sounds too good to be true, so it probably is.
Absolutely. And for the folks who might not know what contact tracing is, Courtney, do you mind just talking about that briefly?
Yeah, so they're using contact tracing right now in Wisconsin. If somebody tests positive for COVID or showing symptoms of COVID, they're using contact tracing to let people know who might have been in contact with that person. So you might get contacted by these contact tracers. It's a way for us to keep an eye on the spread of the virus and to try to flatten the curve a little bit more.
So they definitely should not be asking you for personal information or money.
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
they're not going to ask for a Medicare number, or they're not going to say, click this link. They're just going to ask how you're feeling, where you've been, that kind of stuff. And we will provide a link, I'm sure, for the press release, which again has all kinds of information about who you can contact if you have questions. Yeah.
Absolutely. So all the information and websites that Courtney is referencing to will be in the body of the Facebook once we're done recording. And I definitely encourage you to also share this video also on your Facebook page or YouTube page, because there's a lot of good information that folks might not know about, especially when it comes to fraud and scams. And then, so Courtney, what should people do if they think they have been scammed, or maybe even if they think maybe even a loved one has been scammed?
Yeah, so there are a lot of organizations out there that focus on different kinds of scams, so it can be confusing to know where to start. I usually direct people to the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. They're the primary consumer protection agency in Wisconsin, and if they can't help you with your issue, they can direct you to the correct agency. You can find them online for information or to file a complaint at datcp.wi.gov, which is in the banner below. Or I know some people prefer to call and talk to someone. They have that consumer protection hotline at 800-422-7128. And of course, AARP is also here to help. We have the Fraud Watch Network helpline, which is operated by trained volunteers, and they can if you just want to call and talk to someone about what happened, they're happy to listen. If you want to figure out your next steps, they're there for that as well. And you can call the Fraud Watch Network helpline at 877-908-3360.
Great. And we will make sure that we reference that after the fact, so you guys have that phone number. So I did mention that, first of all, I love the AARP website, but I know there's some resources which we're going to get to shortly. But I do have a question from Carrie. Is there a difference for the population over 70 years old related to scams and fraud?
The only differences really are just, again, in the way that they're contacted, and they might be targeted more for those tech support scams versus younger populations. But other than that, it's really, anybody can be targeted by things like imposter scams. One thing, I guess, with older people that we see more often is that grandparent scam, where a scammer will call and they'll pretend to be a family member and they'll say, hey, it's me, your granddaughter, Courtney. I'm traveling in Belize and I got stuck. Please send money right away. Like they're going to arrest me. They have this really fantastical story. And because older people care so much about their family members, they're very willing to send money. And so with those, like I know it sounds really bad, but we suggest hanging up right away and calling them back at what is their phone number. So,
Absolutely.
So with the older populations, it's really just, the types of scams that they get targeted for.
And we have another question from Arlene. So why do people fall for these like scams so easily? What have you found out through AARP about this?
Yeah, so one thing to stress is that this is their job. Like this is all scammers do. They are so good at what they do. And they have manipulation tactics. I mentioned they use fear and intimidation to get people into this heightened emotional state. And they're just so scared that they're willing to do anything. And it's valid because they're saying, we're going to arrest you. Like there's someone outside your house. So they use stuff like that. And they also, with those imposter scams, if somebody calls and says they're from Social Security Administration, that's an agency you should trust. So, if you're not asking questions and you're not staying vigilant about that kind of stuff, it is really easy to be like, oh, yeah, it's Social Security. I trust them. So, but I do want to stress that, this stuff can happen to anyone and it's not the fault of the consumer. It's these scammers are just, like I said, so good at what they do.
Absolutely. And I believe we have one more question that we will bring up before we get to the resources. So from Jim, his is a little bit longer, so we have to tilt our head up. But does AARP's Fraud Watch Network just have general information about fraud awareness, or can you look about, the latest scams, and can you report scams on the site too? And I know you talked a little bit about if somebody is, wanting to talk to AARP, there's a phone number, but if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the AARP Fraud Watch Network is a great resource. It's free for everyone. It's aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork. Jim, you're in luck. We do have a scam tracking map, which is what that image is there. You can see what's going on in your community. You can report scams there, which makes the map even more accurate. So that's a great resource. We also have articles about different kinds of scams there. I know, Amber, you mentioned our podcast. You can listen to all the episodes on our website. You can also sign up for what we call watchdog alerts. So on our website, you can sign up for the emails, but we do also have text versions of those that come right to your phone. You can text FWN to 50757 to get those texts. And there's a helpline number again, which is also on our website. Again, that website is free for anyone, whether you're an AARP member or not. So definitely check it out.
And so I'm, before I came to AARP, you hear about scams and fraud sporadically, only if it kind of happens to a friend or family member. And when I came to AARP last year and I got to meet with you and learn more about what you do, I was just like really impressed that AARP really takes the time and creates resources to try to protect people from scams and fraud, because it does, as you said, people are really good at what they do. That is their job. And I can personally say my uncle definitely was scammed from a romance scam, and lost probably about $20,000. And what is even more interesting is even the police got involved to say, hey, just so you know, you're being scammed, and it still didn't compute because the scammer is so good at what they do. And it's really unfortunate. And that's why I think the resources that AARP gives, it's something that you could pass along to your friends or your family or your contacts to ensure that everything is covered and that people get the information that they need.
Yeah, well, and like you mentioned too, with the romance scams, they're willing to put in the work over the long haul, right?
Yes.
So they're going to form that connection over months and months. And so by the time somebody might say, hey, I think this is a scam, like you should stop sending the money, that person already thinks that they have a deep connection with them. And those romance scams are really popular with the older populations. Which again, like we mentioned, that social isolation is a factor there where they're like, oh, this person cares about me and they don't want to believe that it's a scam.
Correct. And I know last year you guys had a guest speaker, Frank Abnegale, who was an AARP ambassador. And one of the comments that he made is that he also saw an increase in the younger demographic, as you kind of stated. Because they're kind of clicker happy. They see something that maybe sounds too good to be true, and we're like, click, click, and then all of a sudden now there's ransomware. So it's very interesting that it's not just one age group.
Yeah, and I think especially with online shopping sites like Amazon being so popular, I know I've gotten confirmation emails from Amazon before and just clicked the link without thinking about it, but scammers will generate these emails that look exactly like an Amazon confirmation, and they'll say track your package, and then you have to enter information, or just by clicking on the link, now you have ransomware. So it's really important. And I think that younger populations, are shopping online so much. It's really important that we check who the email is from. Does it say Amazon or Amazon, or is it a 0 instead of an O? Like I said, they're really tricky. So you're not going to notice it right away. And we are super click happy. So like I said, I've done that before where I've been like, oh, whatever, just click it without checking it. So
yeah, I've also noticed, and this was even kind of, this has been a couple of years now, where you'll get an email from, like Netflix saying, your account has been compromised, please click this to change your password. And I'm just like, so I actually go into my account to check it out. So that could be another way. If you have any questions for Courtney regarding scams and fraud, please post them below. But Courtney, do you have any, before we wrap it up, do you have any final comments? Sorry. So Mike Murphy, since the CDC is no longer the go-to source for data updates, who will be the authority on the pandemic? If you have any comments towards that.
I would say I know that there has been some recent changes with where the data is going on the number of cases, but the CDC is still going to have information about treatments and cures and, symptoms of the coronavirus. So I still think that they're a good resource. Otherwise, the Wisconsin Department of Health Services has information as well. And I know Amber, we were talking about this earlier today. Even the Red Cross is getting out there and providing information. If you give blood right now, they will give you an antibody test for free. And I know that's a limited time, but that's a good resource too. And you can also check, if you're worried about specifically coronavirus scams, you can check AARP has aarp.org/coronavirus, where you can find those specific scams. You can also find information about the coronavirus in general at our website, that coronavirus website. So, generally, I would say government agencies are typically still trusted resources. Otherwise, you can always come back to AARP and know that we have done the research and we've done the legwork to make sure what we're sharing with you is as up to date as it can be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the website is below. So if you're looking for specific information about the coronavirus, otherwise, if you just went to aarp.org, there is like a looking glass in the upper right-hand corner that you could type in what you're looking for, whether it's fraud, coronavirus, retirement. Definitely we try to make it as easy as possible to get the information you need. So Courtney, do you have any final comments, tips on what we can do as a community to ensure that we're looking out for one another, or any tips on what we should be looking for when it comes to scams and frauds?
Yeah, so I know we've mentioned it a few times, but just checking in with your family members about stuff like this, checking in with your friends, and if something does come up, just making sure that you're not making them feel guilty or ashamed of what has happened, and just being as solution oriented as you can. Go to the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection to figure out your next steps, try to get money back, protect your identity, stuff like that. So just, constantly being vigilant and just knowing it can happen to you, and just being as careful as you can.
Absolutely. And also keeping in mind that even though there's been an uptick since COVID, frauds and scams have been a problem for as far as we can think. So just making sure that you're having those candid conversations with your friends and your family, and that I think Courtney has done a really great job today talking about what to look for, and also if you are finding yourself in an issue where you're being scammed, that there's phone numbers and resources out there that you can connect with. So Courtney, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. I learned a lot, and I definitely encourage people to look at the website that's scrolling below, Fraud Watch Network, and also the podcast. I find the podcast really informative. I listen to them in my car or if I'm cleaning the house, always trying to get that free knowledge when I can. So thank you again so much. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today on Thursdays with AARP Wisconsin. And please join us back here next Thursday while we're interviewing two wonderful interns that AARP has had the pleasure of working with, Ryan and then also Adam is our current intern day. So you're going to hear a little bit about their experience interning with us, and also their plans for the future and what they have learned at AARP that they can use in their career. So we're really excited about having them. Once again, please feel free to share this video on your Facebook or YouTube, tag folks who might get some information out of it. But we want to thank you so much for joining us today, and be safe.